project, and we decided to do the project on school choice, and inside the option of school choice there's school vouchers and charter schools. We're going to look at both options and look at the pros and cons of them and see what they're all about. And I'm Sam.
And I'm Emily.
So first we're going to see what school vouchers are, and we're going to give you a definition. The definition that we found online was an amount of funding issued by the government for which the parents of a child can have control of and are able to direct towards the public or private school of their choice, and the money can either fully or partially pay for the tuition of the child for the year, term, or semester. Next, we're going to look at the history of the voucher program. The oldest programs began in Maine and Vermont in the late 1860s and the early 1870s. Both of these programs are still being used today, although there have been changes made. Next, we're going to look at where vouchers can be seen today across the United States. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration and the George W. Bush administration both pushed for vouchers. As of 2011, it was estimated that nearly 171,000 students would participate in 18 existing school choice programs. These programs were across 10 different states and the District of Columbia. Many of these programs were offered to students in low-income families, low-performing schools, or special education programs. By 2014, the number participating in either vouchers or tax credit scholarships increased to 250,000. Now we're going to look at the Wisconsin voucher system. In 1990, the city of Milwaukee's public school were the first to offer vouchers and has nearly 15,000 students using vouchers as of 2011. During the 2006-2007 school year, over $100 million was paid out in vouchers. Now, over 26% of Milwaukee's students receive public funding to attend schools outside of the Milwaukee public school system. An interesting fact that we found is that if the voucher program alone were considered a school district, it would mark the 6th largest school district in Wisconsin. So there are two sides to this debate. There are some people that are really for the voucher program, and then there are people that are very against it. These are the arguments that people who are for it have. They say that by allowing parents to choose where their child goes to school without having to think about the cost, this provides incentives for schools to increase accountability and school performance. Those who support vouchers argue that the competition brought on by vouchers can increase the quality and efficiencies for both private and public schools that are eligible. All eligible schools must then continue to improve in order to maintain enrollment caused by the competitive nature of the voucher program. The main arguments for those who oppose it are that they put public education in direct competition with private education, threatening to reduce and reallocate public school funding to private schools. One of the arguments that teachers use that argue against the idea of school vouchers are that they are mainly concerned that it would damage educational standards and reduce funding. Another argument is that giving money to parents who choose to send their child to a religious or other school is unconstitutional, and this has to do with the separation of church and state. Finally, we want to share our opinions on school vouchers. Overall, we are not against the voucher program, but we think that it could be used more in moderation. The main problem that we have with the program is that there are public schools that are losing millions of dollars in funding because of the program. We would like to see it used at a smaller scale so that not so much money is being taken away from the public schools.
So let's move on to charter schools. What are charter schools? Here is the definition that we found. They are taxpayer-funded and privately managed schools that are exempted from some rules that apply to other public schools, taxpayer-funded. There's two different types of charter schools. There's a district-run and an independently run. So let's brief you on some history. The first charter school was opened in Minnesota in 1992 following the passage of the charter school law passing in 1991. They were created to give more flexibility in innovation in public schools. The innovation could help have a better public school education. So let's move on to the difference between charter and public schools. So in charter schools, the parents play a huge role in their child's education. Also, members of the community come together and decide how the school will be run based on their educational philosophy and just based on the community of the children. Every school is very different, and each of them has their own mission and purpose. The schools are very small, and the average amount of students is about 250. Teachers are also hired much younger and have less experience, and the school board is appointed, not elected. So some of the pros that we see with charter schools is that students and parents have more choices to decide what kind of education their students should get. They also encourage healthy competition so that the students can challenge themselves. There's more family involvement and interactions, and most of the pros go along with the differences with public education. So charter schools have some cons. The first con is lack of diversity. In the charter schools, they don't see a very diverse population among their students. The second con that we see is a decrease in funding for the schools. Charter schools receive less funding than other public schools. Another con would have to be that there's less accountability and transparency. The schools are privately owned, so there is a lack of accountability for what they do. Another con would have to be the lack of equal opportunity for all students, which charter schools, yes, do give more opportunity, but they don't accommodate for every type of student. The quality of school management is always different from school to school, not like in all public schools that all have to follow the same management. So the final con that we see is the probability of teachers being overworked. The school board discusses the hours that the teachers will work, which many teachers feel like they are being overworked and worn out. These teachers normally work more hours than other public school teachers. So let's look at some of these pictures I have. This shows the percentage of enrollment in charter schools across the 50 states. As you can see, 40 states and the District of Columbia all have charter schools. In D.C., there's 37% of public school students that attend charter schools, and in Arizona, it ranks number 2 with 10%. There are 13 states which have 4 to 9.9% enrollment. There's 10 states that have 1 to 3.9% enrollment, and there is 16 states that have less than 2% enrollment. And finally, there are 10 states that do not have charter schools at all in their states. This next chart shows the profile of enrollment in charter schools. This is the change between 10 years. You can see that there is a decrease in Caucasian students and African American students, but there is an increase of Hispanic students. Now their percentages are beginning to equal out. So looking at this photo, we can see that there are different locations and where charter schools are located. It shows that the most percentage of charter schools are located in cities, which is normal because there is more public schools. And then you see that suburbs are at 21.1%, and then rural is 16.1%, and towns have about 8%. And you can also see that on the right side of the picture that they talk about the free and reduced lunch, and you can see there's been an increase within the last few years of charter schools having an increase of students receiving free or reduced lunch. Yeah. So this final graphic shows the percentage of proficiency in standardized testing between charter and non-charter schools. You can see that in 4th grade, the reading and math, the percentage is lower than non-charter schools. Now in 8th grade, for reading, math, and science, once again, charter schools are much lower than non-charter schools. Overall, you can see that charter schools are not performing as high as non-charter schools in their test scores. So finally, we're going to discuss our opinions on charter schools. So overall, we do support them because they specialize for each group of students that attend them, which gives students more chance to learn that suits them best with their learning styles. Another aspect that we appreciate is that these type of schools are very family orientated, so parents are more involved in the community of the school. These schools are great because they are designed around the community that they are featured in.
Overall, we really enjoy learning about both of these options for school choice. After comparing and contrasting the pros and cons for both of these options, we found that the pros won out for both. We now see why both of these options are prevalent in the education system.
Finally, these are the resources that we use to find all of our information on charter and vouchers. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned a lot.